Dr. Ratio is an imaginary character who follows the path of the hunt and the free 5-star that we will get in 1.6-second phase. He's a DPS who deals imaginary damage using his direct and follow-up attacks. His skill will deal imaginary damage equal to 75% of his attack to a single target, which seems simple at first sight, but using the skill will trigger the talent's follow-up attack, which will greatly improve the total damage. Beware that this follow-up attack will deal imaginary damage equal to 135% of Dr. Ratio's attack, and has 40% fixed chance to trigger. This chance will increase by 20% for every debuff the target enemy has, which means 3 debuffs will guarantee the follow-up attack. As for his ultimate, it deals imaginary damage equal to 144% of Dr. Ratio attack to a single target, and applies a mark called Wiseman's Folly. When Dr. Ratio's allies attack a target afflicted with this mark, Dr. Ratio will launch his follow-up attack. This effect can be triggered up to 2 times. Unlike his talent, Dr. Ratio technique taunts nearby enemies with 100% base chance to reduce enemy target's speed by 15% for 2 turns. That's pretty much everything about his kit, so let's talk a bit about his traces. Max leveling up his traces will give him 12% crit rate, 28% attack and 12.5% defense. As for Ascension bonus abilities, Summation will give him 2.5% crit rate and 5% crit damage for every debuff on the enemy. When he uses his skill, this effect can stack up to 6 times, while Inference have 100% base chance to reduce target enemy effect resistance by 10% for 2 turns when he uses his skill. And Deduction will increase his damage to targets that have 3 or more debuffs by 10% for each debuff to a maximum of 50%. Now for his talent's level up, you should give priority to his talent first, because his follow-up attacks deals most of the damage. Then prioritize ultimate over the skill, and leave normal attacks to the end, though you won't need it that much, since Dr. Ratio requires that you use his skill every turn, so you can deal the maximum amount of damage. Now that we know his kit and traces, we can pick the best relics set for him. For the first choice, I recommend 4 pieces of Wastelander of Banditry Desert, which will give him 10% imaginary damage boost, and 10% crit rate plus 20% crit damage against imprisoned enemies when attacking debuffed enemies. This set without doubt is the best, since his gameplay revolves around attacking debuffed enemies. And we can use 2 pieces of Wastelander and 2 pieces of the Ash Blazing Grand Duke as a substitute for 20% follow-up attack damage increase. As for ornaments, the best choice is Inert Salsado, which give him 8% crit rate, and increases his follow-up attacks and ultimate damage by 15% when his crit rate reach 50%, and that's easy to achieve thanks to the crit rate buffs from his traces. Also, we can use Space Sealing Station as a substitute, which can boost his attack. For main stats, we should go crit rate or crit damage body, attack percent or speed feet, imaginary damage boost planar sphere, and attack percent rope. As for substats, prioritize crit rate and crit damage, then attack percent and speed. Moving on to the best light cones, our first pick is his signature light cone, Baptism of Pure Thought. This light cone will increase his crit damage by 20% for every debuff on the enemy target. Additionally, it will increase the wearer's crit damage dealt against them by 6% up to a maximum of 3 stacks. On top of that, it will increase ultimate damage by 36%, and follow-up attacks will ignore 20% of the enemy target defense for 2 turns. No words can describe how perfect this light cone for Dr. Ratio. But we can always use Worrisome Blissful as a second pick. It will increase his crit rate by 18% and follow-up attack damage by 30%. Also, when the target get hit by follow-up attack, he will get marked with Tame State, which will increase crit damage dealt by 12% for a maximum of 2 stacks. As for an F2P 5-star option, it's obvious. Cruising in the Stellar Sea is all we got. And it's not a bad option. After all, it will increase his crit rate by 8% and another 8% versus enemies with HP equal or lower than 50%, and when the target is defeated, it will increase his attack by 20% for 2 turns. If we talk about 4-star light cones, Return to Darkness will be a great option, especially if you intend to build crit damage body, cause it has 12% crit rate bonus. Also, it has 16% fixed chance to dispel 1 buff on the enemy after crit hit. We can as well use Swordplay for 8% damage dealt increase if we hit the same target, which can stack 5 times for a maximum of 40% damage. Only Silence Remains is another good option that can increase attack by 16%. And if there is only 2 or fewer enemies on the field, it will increase crit rate by 12%. Apparently most of the hunt light cones work so well on Dr. Ratio. Now is the time to talk about Dr. Ratio best teams. Starting with Topaz, which has an amazing synergy with Dr. Ratio as she can provide additional damage and increase his follow-up attack damage, and we can use Silver Wolf as a debuffer. That will increase Dr. Ratio's chances of triggering follow-up attacks. As for healer, we can use Huohuo. Also we can replace Topaz with Tingyun, Silver Wolf with Pella, and Huohuo with Luocha. As for an F2P team, we can use Yukong and Asta as supports, and Natasha as a healer. Finally, we got to his Eidolons. Starting with E1, the maximum stackable count for the summation traceability increases by 4. And when battle begin, he will obtain 4 stacks immediately. This would make a strong improvement as it allows Dr. Ratio to get a total bonus of 25% crit rate and 50% crit damage, while his E2 will deal additional imaginary damage equal to 20% of his attack for every debuff the enemy target has when his talent follow-up attack hit, and this effect can stack 4 times. E3 and E5 will increase ultimate, skill, and talent levels by 2, and basic attack by 1 level. E4 will give him 15 energy every time he trigger the talent follow-up attack, and E6 increases the triggerable count for Wiseman's Folly by 1. Also it increased the damage dealt by talent follow-up attack by 50%. Since we will get him free, you might think of getting his E1, but instead it's better to get his signature light cone first. If you made it to this part of the video, this means that you intend to build him, so here's the required Ascension Materials to reach level 80. And here's the materials to max level up his traces. If you found this useful, don't forget to share, like and subscribe. Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.